Welcome to the Know Your Fundamentals podcast, the show designed to help professional moms like you empower your well-being, strengthen family bonds, and excel in your career while thriving your way. I'm your host, Kelly Berthold, a fellow professional mom, licensed clinical social worker, wellness educator, advocate, and coach. And I created this podcast to provide a space where we can connect foundational principles of well-being with real-life, actionable insights that help us feel more connected to ourselves and others. If you're juggling life, family, and career while seeking balance and authentic connection, this podcast is for you. Each episode we'll hear from our neighbors, uncover the extraordinary in ordinary life, find patterns that help us recognize opportunities for well-being, and get practical, fundamental tips to thrive in your wellness, relationships, parenting, and professional life. You're the expert on you, and I'm here to help you thrive your way. I'm so glad that you're here. Let's jump in. Hi, welcome to the Know Your Fundamentals podcast. Today I have Ellen Mattis with me. So today we're going to be talking about exploring social media impacts on mental health and how shifting our focus to meaningful real-life connections through volunteering, attending community events, and fostering local relationships can help us find balance and build stronger communities. Now, Ellen is a founder and integrated marketing strategist at Hello Social Company. And I'm going to give her a moment to kind of talk a little bit about what she does and what she's interested in. So welcome, Ellen.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I, about 8 years ago, started a business called Hello Social. We are based in Belfont, Pennsylvania, and our work is totally centered around social media marketing. But more specifically, we use social media marketing to get people to have and experience things in real life. So we work primarily with destinations and a lot of downtown, like community revitalization organizations, in a way that gets people excited to come experience live events and just go shopping and see all that there is to see in their own communities and in the communities that they visit.
So being able to have the fun opportunity to bring like that entertainment that inspires people to like want, right? Like when we watch a trailer or something for a movie or a television show, it's enticing. I want to go see this thing, or I want to be involved, or I want to feel connected. I want to explore. So storytelling to help companies get some of that like personal feel that brings people in.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of it is kind of creating a little bit of FOMO. So fear of missing out is probably can be perceived as a negative thing a lot of times, but we kind of help generate that fear of missing out of real life experiences.
Yeah. Well, I'll also kind of say, I think about things on a dialectical perspective. And I was sharing with Ellen earlier that I have a dialectical behavioral background. And what that means is that things can coexist at the same time. So nothing is purely bad or good. It's where does it exist on the spectrum? And how am I exploring all the possibilities of this thing as an and also rather than but or. So I'll say, hey, it sounds like you're using that fear of missing out of really kind of saying, helping people want to feel connected to something that is special. And as human beings, the good side of that, if we're going to say there is a good side, is that we really do want to feel connected with one another. It's a part of like our biology, right? So I would say it's not necessarily having to be just negative FOMO, but it's connecting people with people, and that there's a fun and being able to just share space with other people enjoying that experience. That's why concerts are so successful, right? It's because people want to be in an environment of a shared moment and a shared experience that is special, right? It's a special part of life.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. And ultimately, the goal is to just get people excited to be with other humans and see what can happen when you are in the same space together.
Okay, so would you say that you're using social media as a funnel to help people you like go through social media to then connect ultimately to in-person engagement?
Yes, absolutely. In the marketing world, we talk about funnels a lot. And for us, social media is very, very top of that funnel. And like you said, the end result is people showing up in a community at a small business and doing the thing together in some way.
Yeah. Well, I think that that helps kind of like really connect to how you use social media to build connections, right? So social media is a tool for providing a storytelling visual to engage people's biological interest in being around each other and sharing something special in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you get involved into, you know, social media or community building? What was kind of like, was it a chicken before the egg? Or where did you start with that exploration for yourself that got you interested in what you do right now?
That's a good question. It's kind of a culmination of a lot of different things, I feel like. On one
Get
hand,
into it. Share all of it.
right.
Go ahead. You grew up.
I grew up in a really connected environment. So my family is just very active in their own community. They're really active in their downtown's revitalization. They're active in their church. They just do all of the things. And I think my parents and my siblings for sure are known as these people that if something is going on in your lives, like you can call them, they will help. And that kind of extends beyond to aunts, uncles, kind of a lot of people in my hometown. So I just grew up in that environment that being a part of community was very natural. And the thing I always say is like we never missed a community dinner, we never missed a parade. Like it didn't even occur to me that you didn't go to those things because they were just so ingrained in me. And then the other side of it is that when I moved to this area 8 years ago, I moved here specifically to start my business. And this was an area that my husband was familiar with because he grew up not too far away, but I was coming here with completely fresh eyes. So we moved here and I was craving a way to get involved in my community or just build community in some way, right? And the way that I did that was I started co-working. So at that point in Belfont, the first ever co-working space in the community was opening called Springboard, and ended up becoming the first member. And that was really exciting because I was able to just be a part of that really exciting thing happening in the downtown. And also, it was going to be a place where I could meet with clients professionally and start to grow my business with just like a more professional appearance than working from home. But also, I was going to be able to connect with all of the other coworkers that were going to be working out of there as well. So that was my first real introduction to community in this phase of life. And then as time went on, because I was the first member, I ended up helping give tours and getting other people excited about coming to work at Springboard because I didn't want to be alone there. And ultimately, that made me realize that I was really interested in community revitalization as a whole. So I kind of jumped in full force at that point to volunteering with Downtown Belfont Inc., which is Belfont's community revitalization organization, and just tried with a bunch of other people that were committed to growing the community to do fun things and see what happened. So I was, part of a group that started Fridays in the Font and held the first ever Belfont Under the Lights and things like that. And just found all of these ways that we could bring people together so that we didn't have to drive to other towns to do those fun things. And what was interesting about it is that my work really shifted as a result of that. So when I first opened the business, it was very much a full service digital marketing agency. We were building websites, albeit maybe not very well. We were doing digital advertising. We were just doing a lot of things that are typically associated with digital marketing. We completely honed in on the social media marketing side of things over time. And then as time continued to go on, we completely honed in on that destination in downtown and experience niche, if you will. So I found where we belong. I found where I belong in a lot of ways. And at the end of the day, community is kind of all of that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. So, understanding like just if individuals are listening, Belfont is it's a town that is very similar to a lot of rural towns that may also be a little bit further away from a small metropolitan area. But thinking about Belfont as a a small area that has been historically attempting to kind of like renovate and maintain some of its infrastructure that's been around since like some of it the 18th century, a lot of it, especially centrally located in the 18th century. A number of years ago, back in 2007, maybe even six, I think it was around that time, a number of those buildings were burned down. And so some of this revitalization that has been happening here is different than gentrification. And so what the difference is that there's a lot of community people that are living within the region and that are putting in a lot of their individual time. And these are not millionaires. There's not an Amazon swooping in and, putting in a manufacturing facility. It's brick and mortar hometown individuals that are attempting to really strategically make it a destination that both the community can be very, happy with, but also find their resources and keep businesses moving and building that serve the community, and also are bringing in tourism that allows for other individuals outside the community to recognize the beauty of this historic site and the beauty of the community that's even in this area. So being a part of what you're kind of describing here, Ellen, is not like any small feat, because where Bellefonte even was, I would say 15 or so years ago, it has come a very long way. And I would not say, again, with a bunch of millionaires having, a ton of money where they're just swooping in and buying up businesses. This has been a grassroots effort to build and use strategies to continue to bring in innovation and just community engagement and an appreciation for a hometown feel, right? Which again has kind of been lost over the early 21st century. And so it's kind of like, no, we really need to focus in on building our communities right where we live, right? And really kind of putting in our breath and energy and love into bringing these communities back up to speed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that's really cool about it too is that so many of the people that have gotten involved in Bellefonte and in other communities too, I see it in State College and some of the surrounding areas, that a lot of them are business owners. They have chosen to make this investment, their investment of time, their investment of themselves, their investment of money, to be a part of this community, and they want to see it thrive as a result. So, a lot of people that have been instrumental in Bellefonte's revitalization are small business owners, bed and breakfast owners, brick and mortar store owners. They have other service-based businesses, and everybody's just excited, like you said, to take this very grassroots approach and just kind of do what needs to be done to make it a great place to live. And when I first got involved, I remember one of the things I said was, I just want to make this a great place for our kids to live someday. And those were hypothetical kids at that point. And now I have two kids, and it's really exciting that I have been able to play a small part in creating this space where I love that my kids are going to grow up there.
Yeah. Yeah. So even just being able to take a moment to think about when you're having conversations with, and I'm going to be more present tense right now. I may ask you to see those early conversations with people who are really just figuring out how to engage. But right now, when you're having these conversations and there's strategizing the next summer events that are happening, Summer in the Font, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Friday in the Font, yeah.
Okay, sorry, yes. But being able to kind of strategize those things, what is the energy that you pick up from other people? How does it make you feel in your body when you know that you're going to go do this thing that is so meaningful to the community?
It's an interesting question because I think there's two sides to it, to be honest. The one side is that, of course, there's excitement. Who doesn't want to throw a giant bash in Talleyrand Park one Friday a month for all their friends and family and neighbors to come to? There's a lot of fun in that. But then the other side of it is that the community as a whole, and I think this is a nationwide problem right now, is that there's a lot of volunteer burnout. And it's just because people aren't volunteering the way that they used to. Like I said, when I was growing up, it wasn't uncommon for my parents and all of their close friends to all be, serving dinner at a church event. You don't see that as much anymore. And so there's a huge capacity discussion that becomes a part of community revitalization as a whole, because our nonprofits, not even just the ones that are throwing the fun events, are all starved for volunteers right now. And I think that people, if they realize that volunteering um, could be whatever they wanted to give, could be whatever time they want to give, or whatever. It could be expertise. It could be merely just showing up and doing something for an hour. Um, I think if they realize that they set the rules there, that they'd be more willing to do it. So I think that goes back to like this whole discussion that we're having today. You know, how can volunteering be a way that people become more active in their communities in a way that feels really fulfilling?
Yeah. So, what do you find are in your experience, if you had received any feedback, or even if you're just kind of like considering some of the potential reasons, even if you haven't gotten direct feedback about it, but what are some of the reasons why people may be either nervous or apprehensive, or even just like not considering the possibility of volunteering from your perspective?
I think that nobody has totally cracked the code for how to convey volunteer opportunities. And I say that knowing that there's a fantastic resource here called Volunteer Center County. And the founder of that, Ann Eccles, is working really hard to put volunteer opportunities in front of people in a really easy to digest way. But there's still it's like a lack of know-how when it comes to how do I decide what I want to do, right? And I think people gravitate towards the ones that they hear about, right? Like we all know that you can go walk dogs at the Humane Society, or we all know that you can go deliver meals for the elderly or something like that. But there's a lot of out of the box ways that you can also volunteer. And that's where I think there's a lot to learn about communication and just putting those opportunities out there. But also I think people need to just get into the habit of reaching out to organizations that they're interested in. So, you know, I was really excited to sit down last week with a woman who's recently retired, and she said, I spent a long time in Bellefonte before I retired, and I'm interested in getting involved in the community more and finding out like what else Bellefonte can become. And she thought that our organization might be the way to do that. So that was a great conversation to have, and just see kind of which role she might be able to step into as a result of that. So with any volunteer opportunity, just kind of honing in on what your interests are, what your skills are, and going for it, just asking about it. However, I will say the other side of that is it's okay to do a volunteer opportunity that has nothing to do with your professional life. And I think that, you know, I'll go as far as saying that a mistake that I've made over the years from a mental health perspective is that I do put like all of my eggs in this marketing community development basket, and that can cause a lot of burnout. So, you know, like maybe someday I do want to just go walk dogs one day and clear my mind that way. So volunteering can literally be whatever you want it to be. It's just a matter of how you want to give your time and how much time you want to give.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, like my little mental wellness anecdotes in here is that we're going through a loneliness epidemic. And so more and more people are feeling lonely and isolated. And there's a lot of reasons for that, including social media, right? But one of the reasons for that, I call it like living in bubbles. And the pandemic absolutely had an impact on exasperating the issue, is because when we become uncomfortable with connecting with other people, oftentimes it feels unsafe to us to put ourselves out there, right? Because our body goes, I'm so anxious. I feel like I have quote unquote social anxiety. It's not good for me. If it feels uncomfortable or scary, or even if I'm feeling like a panic, it must be bad. And the truth is that our body communicates discomfort anytime it is doing something that it's just not used to doing. And so even though we know human connection and being around other people is almost like drinking water, right? If we're just like take a shower after we haven't been feeling so good, and we're like, wow, why do I feel so refreshed? It's osmosis, right? Just being immersed in it a little bit, our body goes, ah, right, this is what I needed. And sometimes it also takes a little bit of additional exposure to help our body catch up and say, okay, I believe you now. I believe you now that it's safe. But a lot of work with like trying to break out of our loneliness, our isolation, our habits that we're kind of trying to break out of socially, of being a little too antisocial, right? It has long-term consequences in our short-term or small communities and our larger, international community, our universal community. And so something that I'd like individuals who are listening to this to contemplate is what makes me feel nervous and I know would be good for me. And where is it that I can take a step to just practicing exposing myself to that discomfort and giving myself an opportunity to do it over and over and over again. So my body learns to be competent in just social engagement. And that's how we learn to do anything, right? So whether you want to volunteer in something that feels easier for you because you're more habitually used to doing whatever that thing is, and you can do that, right? So for you, Alan, it may be like, oh yeah, marketing makes so much sense for me because like it's just right in my wheelhouse. And you also like obviously are very well accustomed to volunteering in all these other ways too. So I'm only using you right now for that particular example. And say like you love music or you love gardening and you just feel weird about being with other people that are doing that in a community and not knowing how you're going to shovel and like maybe someone's going to like say something about your technique. Go and do the thing that you may be interested in doing that you have very little experience in. You may also pick something that is something you don't even want to do, but you know is going to help your community, right? So you can mix and match. And any and all of those things are going to strengthen your body and are good for your mental health. So whether you do something that's easier, still hard, but you enjoy to do, practicing doing that builds actual cognitive connections in your brain, blah, blah, blah. But if you can also do things that are hard that you don't enjoy doing, that is also good for your brain. So you don't have to enjoy volunteering to volunteer, and it will be good for you no matter what. And spiel. So anything you'd like to add to that there, Alan?
And so I think that about covered it.
Okay. Yeah. So what are some other like things when it comes to the social media perspective, like with mental health that you became aware of and how it impacts whether it's community or how you approach your business?
I think the biggest thing for me for social media is setting really clear boundaries about what is okay for me personally, what is okay for my team when it comes to social media, and even like what's okay for my family too. So, and I think I'm an elder millennial, so I think that is relevant to the discussion. I very much grew up in a time period where social media was just being introduced. As a result, social media bullying became very prevalent when I was in my later years of high school, early years of college. Those are things that I'm always hyper aware of as I'm parenting now because I don't want my kids to experience things like that. I know that they're going to, but you know what I'm getting at. I think we've created these totally different universes surrounding social media and just technology use in general that are super unhealthy. So if I can create a business in a way that condones like more safe practices of social media use, I think that I've done my small part. So for example, something that we have as a literal written value for our team is we don't believe in social media immersion fees. You know, there's especially in this industry, there's kind of this expectation that you will answer comments 24/7, you will respond to direct messages 24/7. And that there's this perception that you always have to be on as a brand. And we don't subscribe to it. And we are very clear with our clients when they sign up to work with us that, we will not be doing those like community management tasks after hours. If there's something that they feel they need to tackle after hours, that's totally fair. And they can definitely reach out to us if something is happening that they would like some counsel on. But more often than not, we are unavailable after work hours. We also are just very intentional about kind of when we do the work. Most of our day is actually spent off of social media platforms. So we write content in a totally different space. All of the pieces of the social media puzzle, we kind of do elsewhere so that when we do have to be on the social platforms for the day, it's really intentional. And I think like a misconception about social media managers as a whole is like we just spend the whole day scrolling, and that could not be further from the truth. So just trying to create those boundaries as much as I can, but there's always just things that sneak in, right? And we've all, I think, been sucked into the trap of, oh, I needed to get today's reel out, but then I ended up scrolling for 30 minutes accidentally. And that's that dopamine hit like coming for you. And I think that we all struggle with that, but I'm doing what I can to help nurture a different lifestyle?
Yeah, well, I would say that, like, if you thought about a lot of different industries where, you recognize that you are in an environment that you have to attempt to be more aware, and you are surrounded by certain, whether you can say it's like an environmental toxin, right? This is your environmental toxin. And you can attempt to have as many of these like protective factors around yourself to decrease the toxicity. And nevertheless, what we are using these devices that, whether it's email, right? Like someone who doesn't work in social media at all, or there may not even have a social media account, they may be constantly drawn to checking their email over and over and again because it's the same thing, right? It's just the body getting this instant gratification from these experiences. And there's going to be a biological pull for that. So it's important for us to like not judge our character because these devices and the technology itself is meant to keep you kind of pulling in, and also kind of like feeds off of our natural autopilot, right? Which is like, where am I? How did I get here? I've been doing this for 30 minutes and now I'm aware, right? Because we just also can't be fully attentive and intentional all the time. But again, that's what this technology is for, is to be like, hey, you're on autopilot. Just do your autopilot thing. Being able to have, again, like if you're working in any kind of particular environment, it's good for you to have boundaries that are generally structured and put into place to help support you, kind of like putting a wall against that toxicity a little bit. So maybe you can't necessarily completely and utterly prevent it. And it's a proactive measure that you can consistently come back to. So long-term complications are less, prevalent, right? So being able to do that, do you find that your team are supporting each other and like helping to maintain some of those healthy boundaries with each other by using that as a value, right? But are you living that value week to week?
I think so. Yeah. And, something that's hard about it too is that we are a fully remote business. So, and we're spread all over the East Coast. So there's not a good way to know, like, yes, is Katie's mental health great today? I can't always know for sure. But, I'd like to think that they are respecting the boundaries in that way and that they've figured out a system that works for them. The other thing is Slack. Slack is such a great tool that we use to communicate with each other and communicate with our clients as well. We're very intentional, I think, about the times that we're actually available on there because, again, elder millennials in this world where like AOL Instant Messenger was, I had to put up an away message telling people when I was eating a sandwich. And, that's not the kind of culture we're trying to have on Slack. When you have the headspace to respond to messages, that's when you are able to be on Slack and dedicate that time to thoughtfully responding.
Yeah, yeah. And I think with our hustle culture too, making it, more clear too that like we tend to work more effectively and be more efficient and more productive when we are giving ourselves space from whatever our work activity is. And so if we're constantly grinding a number of hours a day and we're losing sleep, or we're overstimulated when we go to sleep and we're not getting restful sleep, and then we're coming back at it day in and day out, that productivity, right? It may take you 3 times as long to do, whether it's a social media post or something else. Where if you were well rested and you were giving yourself some of those healthier boundaries, again, whether it's this or other type of work activities, you can generally do it within, a fragment of the time. So for any of us, again, whether it's social media or something else, setting healthy work-life boundaries is not just good for you, is also good for modeling to our children, it's also a butterfly effect for our economy and again, our community, by when we're living those values and we're living things that are healthy for us, we're also helping other people do that for themselves as well. So it starts with us. Every little thing we do also has a bigger impact on our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a personal standpoint too, something that I've been really intentional about is just not following people for the sake of following them. And I think this is kind of a trap that we've been led to believe that we have to be in. Just because you're friends with somebody in real life doesn't mean that you have to follow them on Instagram. If for some reason the things that they post you don't align with or make you sad for whatever reason, you're not you're not required to follow anybody just because you know them, right? And then similarly, we're not required to engage with content just because we can. So I think that's something that I've really taken a more intentional approach about over the years is, on my personal account, I have tried really hard to curate, if you will, a feed that is more calming for me. Well, if you were to scroll through my home feed right now, it's mostly like slow living and planting a vegetable garden and a pretty decor. And I very much have tried to get out of spaces that just add more to the noise of the daily social media grind already.
Yeah. And so what are some ways that you do that? Like, what are the technical ways that you find some of these things that like are kind of showing up on your feed and you quiet them down?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing to do is just use the mute button. So if you don't want to go as far as unfollowing somebody, you can click on anybody's profile and mute them. You can choose to mute either their feed posts or just their story posts, which can be really helpful, especially if you have people in your life that post a lot of stories. The other thing that you can do is kind of just trick your algorithm into serving you more content that you like. So there's, three dots, the little menu on the top of every post. You can hit that and there's going to be a button that says like, see more content like this or hide this. Just use those features until you start seeing something that you like better. You can also do a search. So if you want to see more hiking content, do a search in the discovery feature for hiking, start liking some posts, and then the next time you log in, there's going to be more posts like that in your feed. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of trick it into being whatever you want to do. And I think, sometimes when I'm sitting next to my husband and he's scrolling at the same time as me, I'm just like, I cannot believe that our feeds are so wildly different. And it just goes to show that the things that you show interest in that's what you're going to be served all the time. So it's important to curate that on your own rather than just take whatever is served to you.
Right. So like you're describing an intentional approach, right? Like, so we're recognizing the control that we have over what we are digesting, and we're choosing to kind of like wield some of that power and control by taking that power back and saying, okay, this is what I want my algorithm to look like, rather than how is the algorithm kind of happening to me? And I'm allowing that to then have an impact on my life. Right.
For sure.
So intentional choices allow us to have a little bit more focus on, again, our own personal well-being by making these personal proactive choices.
Yeah. I think another way you can do this is by really honing in on what kind of ads you're getting served too. So I found myself in a rut this past year. I had a baby in May, and I got to a point where I was doing those 2 a.m. feedings and I was scrolling while the baby was still half asleep. And it was like, here's a cute baby outfit. Here's a cute baby toy. Here's a cute thing. Like, here's all the things you need to be a good mom. I was falling for it, whether it was like sleep deprivation or just the algorithm knew me really well at that point. I had to really sit myself down in the fall and say, I'm putting a stop to this. And I went through and I started changing all of my ad preferences on every single ad that I was getting served. I hit that menu and I said, stop sending me ads like this. So I would say it's irrelevant or I'm not interested. And over time, it took a long time. I'm now getting served fewer and fewer ads. And of course, like there's irony in this because I place these ads for a living and I use like these behaviors to place ads in a different way on social media. But I do truly hope that we are creating content and putting content out into the world that again gets people to have those in real life experiences.
Yeah. Well, even like the dialectic here with that experience, that if businesses are proactively putting out material that is good for themselves and also for other people, right? And also the individual consumer is recognizing their power in their own personal choices and how they are also navigating things, and not just like necessarily taking everything that's just in front of them, right? So that understanding how the brain works helps us go like, oh, my brain wants to do this thing, instead of like just judging myself like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm such a bad mom, or like, oh, I'm overspending. Like I have a spending problems. Like, no, my brain is just supposed to be like sucking in all this information. And now I feel like I'm judging myself rather than just focusing on what works to problem solve through. And you did, right? So like, what was happening to you. And then you were able to kind of like take that step. I think another neurological perspective here too is being able to recognize that like taking intentional choices like you're describing will also be naturally harder, right? Like you had to tell your body, I have to set time aside to do this thing, right? It's not that I can just say like, phone, stop it, right? Like that would be really nice. Like, don't give me this crap bleep bleep anymore, right? But you have to like set time aside and companies know that, right? So they're going to send you all these things because it's like even hitting the unsubscribe button takes caloric energy and your body's just like, it's not
Yeah.
worth the 10 calories of my brain right now to just like put in that effort. So instead of judging yourself when, not just you, Alan, but whoever's listening, instead of judging ourselves for recognizing when our body's like, I have to do this thing, just accept it. Just accept the fact that it is hard. And yes, you will likely have to put some form of intentional energy to make these changes. But no matter what it is in life, any proactive choice is going to require more energy, and your body is naturally not going to want to just instinctually do it. So taking that approach non-judgmentally will take you a lot farther than judging and blaming yourself for how difficult it is. It is just difficult. Accept it and then decide how you're going to proceed from there.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Gretchen Rubin?
Oh, I'm not.
She has a podcast called The Happiness Project and just has a lot of content and resources surrounding that. And she studies happiness as a whole. And one of the
Oh,
things that
is she the Yale researcher? Is she from Yale?
I'm not sure,
Okay,
but
go ahead.
she has a saying like, if you can accomplish it in 2 minutes, just do it.
Mhm.
So how simple would it be to just spend the next 2 minutes just scrolling through your feed and unsubscribing to stuff that you don't resonate with. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a long marathon. It can just be literally 2 minutes. And it's one inkling closer to being happier.
Right. And I'd say even if you have the impulse, anytime that you are intentionally aware and you have the impulse to say, do this thing, it's kind of like pushing a tree over that has been cracked and it's just waiting for a little bit of wind to push it over. Sometimes that's the extra energy that you need to just kind of like push it over, right? So whether it is 2 minutes or even if it's like, I have 20 seconds right now to convince my thumb to go to those three dots and hit that button. When you are intentionally aware of like, I want to stop this thing, try to just be, oh, there it is. And then go and lean in and blow that tree down. Right. So anytime we're intentionally aware, we have that moment is magic and proactive choice. So being mindfully aware allows us an opportunity to exercise proactive intentional choice. If you're unaware, you have no choice. You have no power. So thank you for sharing that. That's really important.
Like,
Yeah. So anything else you want to get into before we discuss the fundamentals?
no, I don't think so.
Yeah, well, those were really great points. I'm trying to think like, so getting into like the fundamentals, what are some things that you feel like are tangible that people can, you already gave so many, like I think even just like the last 10 minutes, but what are some intentional ways that we can kind of take some of that power back?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, just recognizing and being aware that social media does have an impact on mental health. And like you said earlier, social media is designed to get us to come back and to get us to keep scrolling and get us to keep taking some sort of action. So just being aware of that is going to be huge moving forward. And hopefully once you become aware of it, maybe you'll start to like experience a little less anxiety. I'll let you handle that, but and get back to feeling just more connected. The next would be the value of community connection. So just remember that, we use social media because we crave that connection in a way. We crave we crave somebody commenting on our posts, but we can get that same feeling from hanging out with people in real life. And sometimes it's way more fulfilling than it is on your screen. I would say most of the time it's way more fulfilling than it is on your screen. Take some time to intentionally find a way to connect with other people. One of the things that I recently did was I was so sick of talking to people about books online that I hosted a group of people at my house to talk about books in real life. And people showed up that I hadn't even met before. Like these were people that also we're just craving this community surrounding a common interest, and somebody just has to start it to start that connectedness.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say would be to find balance. So it's inevitable that you're going to use social media. There's no way to eliminate it completely unless you want to go really hardcore and get like the brick phone. But for, I think the majority of us, social media is just part of daily life. So it's going to be important to set boundaries. So that could mean not using it after a certain time of day. That could mean not even opening any apps before a certain time of day when you wake up in the morning. There are a lot of ways that you can set those boundaries. Ultimately, like you have to make those decisions for what's going to work for you. And then when you do have to use social media and you do want to use social media, use it meaningfully. Use it as a way to get people together in real life. Use it as a way to share the things that are happening in your community. Use it as a way to say, like, Smith and Front in Belfront is holding this really cool Sunday Fun Day event. Do you want to come to it with me? Those are the ways that social media can be used for good and the ways to get excited about the things happening in your community through that online world again. I will end with too, if you're a mom that's listening, I think that like that loneliness element that we talked about earlier is it hits new levels when you become a mom because it becomes really isolating to just be with your kids all the time and find meaningful ways to see other parents in a way that isn't completely overwhelming. I think we have a lot of great resources here locally. Our local library system is fantastic. I take my kids to the library almost once a week just to be surrounded by other humans with small children. We have like a local stroller fitness class. We have just a lot of people trying to bring moms together. And I have to believe that those exist in a lot of communities. So seek out those opportunities to be with your tiny humans with other adults.
Yeah, those are really great. And with the one element that you're kind of communicating to with just social media, just being like a part of our lives, like we could think about it like almost like potato chips and like foods that we know and we love, right? And like we're going to eat chocolate, we're going to eat like our candies. They're going to be a part of these staples in our everyday life. And we don't have whole meals after them, right? Like we balance them with other things that are, a part of our lives. So we can enjoy it and finding deeper substance in these like slow burn protein relationships, right? So when we get to be around other people, those are long term fulfilling. And there's even like, again, those chemical releases in our brain, but they aren't like high spikes, like if you were having like sugar and then your sugar's crashing afterward. It's like, there's substance there, right? So thinking about that and recognizing too that when we are down and we're exhausted, like an example of being a new mom, right? Our brain has even harder time not feeling overly isolated and also not wanting just to be on social media because when we're rested, we have an easier time regulating and controlling our attention and choosing how to proceed. So if you're finding that you're having a harder time getting off of social media or having a harder time judging yourself as a mother, no matter how old you are, but especially, during those postpartum periods, recognizing that if you can get some extra distance away from that, get outside, get some fresh air and just be around people, have conversations, even if you're nervous, have conversations, even if someone's looking at you flat and they're like, I don't know what to do with you. Attempt to just do those things because your body will build competence. And I know, Ellen, for you, you grew up through it. So it may feel one particular way for you. And you also recognized that during your postpartum period, you still felt that loneliness and that, I need to figure something out here. Right. So you've had years and years of experience of that community connection. And you still have to, and during that period, we're kind of struggling a little bit. Right. So it's normal, it's natural, and try not to reinvent the wheel. Get help, seek connection. And even if that's with your primary care physician or trusted family members or your closest friends, even if it's like a hotline, get some connection to help you get what you need during those periods. And not just focusing on the social media comparisons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to add to that too, use social media in a way that works for you. And what I mean by that is, like I'm kind of a naturally extroverted person. So I'm the mom at the park that is most likely to strike up a conversation with you. but I know that somebody else may not be that person. They could be waiting for me to do that. So there's a whole element to that. But there's like, that's another great way to use social media. Maybe you've been following another mom that you see is in the same phase of life as you. Like, just send them a direct message, ask them for coffee sometime. Using social media as the conduit to build those in-person relationships can be really impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for other fellow women out there, attempt to try to be receptive or at least gently tell the other person no and not just ghost them, which is also something that happens on social media, right? So please still use your social skills, whether it's in person or online, right? So Ellen, what's a quote that you want to share today?
Right. So I really wanted to find a quote that was from Fred Rogers because I think that like he embodies being a good neighbor and being a part of community, right? So I went through like 3 million Fred Rogers quotes, and whether this is relevant or not, I hope you're proud of yourself for the times you've said yes, when all it meant was extra work for you and was seemingly helpful only to somebody else. And I felt like that really struck a chord with like getting involved with your community and volunteering, because sometimes volunteer efforts really go unrecognized, but they are so impactful to the greater good.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I love Fred Rogers. My first podcast episode, like my book that will come at some point in time, it introduces a Fred Rogers quote because it's just like, we're so unique, right? And also this podcast itself is inspired in some way with connecting with our unique potential, right? And that we're supporting each other in fostering our unique potential and sharing it with the world and helping other people do the same. So I think, community vibes all around, snaps for, Fred, right? But thank you so much for being with us today, Ellen. I really appreciate your time and your insight.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Fundamentals podcast. I hope this episode gave you some valuable tools and helped you feel more connected to yourself and others. Get more life, family, and career fundamentals when you follow Know Your Fundamentals on social media, including Instagram and YouTube. You can also join the Fundamentals Life, Family, and Career Wellness Facebook group. There you'll get access to live trainings, helpful resources, Q&As with our guests, and professional mom community that's here to support you in thriving your way. I'm cheering you on, and I hope to hear from you soon.